I'm going to start recording now, just in
Okay.
case you say something interesting between now and we officially get started, which we kind of already have. Um,
And it goes nonstop, right?
yeah, it goes non. That's what I meant to ask her. Would it be cutting this stuff up? But who knows? I guess some of the stuff we may say they may have to cut around it. I don't
Right. You
know.
know how we
So this
do.
is just a conversation between me and you, the fabulous cinematographer DP, and your journey through life and your profession. So
Okay.
it's just basic conversation. I'm gonna ask a few questions, and we go from there. If you got any questions for me, we go from there. But it's all about you. So don't try to make this
Okay.
about me. Okay. So don't ask me
Okay.
anything. Don't ask me anything about my job. This is about you and your job and your
Okay.
journey through
Okay.
it. All right.
All right. So
All
so
right.
we're just hanging out, me and you.
We just this is the hangout that we've been trying to do for many years. This is me
Okay.
inviting you over for a drink. And
Okay.
I know
There we
you
go.
don't drink, but this is that moment right here.
Okay. Okay.
Okay? That's
I'm
that's
down. Let's
that's
do
what
it.
this is. That's what this is. Um so how's life? And I know it's strange, everybody was kind of on a roll here in the beginning of the year, and then all of a sudden things just came to a halt. But so how are you, first of all?
I'm good. I'm good. You're right. This year is a strange year, but I'm kind of a introvert myself, so I'm sort of in my element a little bit.
Yeah,
Um, it gives me a reason to stay home. So
right. So
yeah.
I've heard that term introvert a lot, and people who thought they were introverts and now are forced to really reckon with the idea of really being that introvert, right?
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
have you learned anything about you being an introvert that you didn't know before? Like, are you really enjoying it, or is it like, oh, you know what, I could really get out and do some things right now?
No, I'm really enjoying it. I'm really enjoying it. I mean, granted, I'm not like, a shut-in or whatever. I do have friends. I do like hanging out, stuff like that. But no, I mean, you know, s- someone defined an introvert as a person who gets energy from being alone, you know, and that's me.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
I I too am. I'm not a out and out introvert, but I do like
right,
the alone time.
right,
And it takes me back to my early years as a youth. And my granddad would always tell me those people who don't like being by themselves usually don't like the company, right?
right, right,
And earlier he told me that when I was like 5, and I was
right,
like, I had no idea what he was talking about until I got older, which means, you know, do you enjoy being by yourself? Do you enjoy being with yourself? Do you, like you said, you get that energy? So I guess that's where some of us are right now, and we're starting to realize who we are as people, and our
totally.
growth, and in our growth, and what we need to work on, um,
Yeah,
and so
yeah. It's a reckoning for a lot of people for sure.
it is.
Yeah,
It really is. It really opens your eyes on a lot of things about yourself.
yeah.
Um, so with all this time that you've had, when was the last time you worked? Like, were you on a show and something and it shut down, or were you preparing for a show or anything like that?
No, I was the last show that I did wrapped in November.
Hmm.
And it's funny, I actually wanted to take like some time off, do some traveling, things like that. And yeah, I guess, now the time off is a bit forced. But I've been trying to enjoy it a little bit. I'm definitely ready to get back to work, like right now.
Right,
But
right.
I enjoyed a little bit of downtime. I didn't like the reason for it. Obviously there's a lot of people suffering out there right now. But
Hmm.
just trying to look on the bright side of things,
Yeah, yeah. So with the downtime, because I've seen people post stuff, and and even talk to people over the phone and virtually, like we're doing right now, and they've really tapped into their creative side. What, and no matter what that is, it could be cooking, it could be yard work or woodworking. So in your profession as a cinematographer, as a DP, and we'll get deeper into that in a minute. But has that helped you in any way? Your creativity level, like, or do you study movies now more? Do you watch more movies? As far as studying them and really, really diving in. It's like, you know what, next show I'm going to do that on my next show.
Yeah.
Has this helped you out in your creativeness?
Yeah, it definitely has. Like you said, I've been like watching a lot more movies, watching a lot more TV. I've been able to like read a lot more too, which helps with analysis of story and stuff like that. I've also been like getting like more into the photography side of things too. I've had a lot of like photos on the backlog that I've been like going through and like just taking a look at and just trying to get inspired again.
Right.
So yeah, it's definitely helped a lot. It's helped me to sort of make plans on what I want to work on once we do start back up again, once everyone gets back to work. Yeah, there's a lot of things I want to work on, whether it's my managerial skills or even, just being creative as a DP, those skills. So yeah, just trying to make it work and trying to use this time to just work on myself too. So
yeah. Well, that's great, and I'm glad that you're not just sitting still, because
right.
because that could be a thing too, where you have this time, you really don't know what to do with it, and you just sit there and you're like, well, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll get to it
Right.
later.
Right.
So as a DP, well, let's back up. Let's just start from the beginning, because I know a little bit of it, but some people don't know any of it. Like, how did you get started? But I want to know how you got started, but I also want to know, like, has this always been a thing for you? Like, being a DP or being in the industry, the movie television industry, has that always been, like, from a kid? Like, where did it start? Like, when did it start?
Yeah. My start was a little bit different because I grew up in the Virgin Islands, and we didn't really have a lot of exposure to the behind the scenes of movies. But I know from when I was a little kid, I definitely wanted to be in the movies. So I remember going to see Jurassic Park when I was a kid and just like falling in love with it. And I was like, oh man, I have to be a part of this somehow. And all that I saw were the people up on screen. So I was like, I want to be an actor. Um, so for most of my life, I wanted to be an actor. And I was in, theater programs in school, through high school. And I also minored in theater and majored in film when I went to college. So, my story isn't like, oh, I picked up a camera and, a light bulb went off. It was a little bit more different than that. But I always knew that I wanted to be in the movie industry. And yeah, so just started there.
So you went from wanting to be an actor. First of all, you
Yeah,
went from the Virgin Islands to watching television in the Virgin Islands, Jurassic Park, as a kid,
right.
to wanting to be an actor and then going to the theater program. So all of a sudden, was it something that, what, you saw somebody behind the scenes that reminded you, or that light bulb went off, like, hey, if this acting career doesn't kick off, maybe I can work behind the camera. Was it something like that, or?
No, it was actually another movie. So my major was in film at Howard University, and I
HBCU.
used to HBCU exactly. Um, so yeah, because I was one of the only people that really wanted to, focus on camera stuff, in the film program, I ended up like, directing a lot and shooting a lot, especially shooting a lot for myself, because I was also like really interested in directing. And I always used to get compliments on how everything looked and things like that, but it never really clicked for me until um, I went to the theaters and saw the movie Road to Perdition.
Hmm.
It's a Sam Mendes movie with Tom Hanks, and the movie like touched me so much in regards to the imagery and how it worked with every other element of the film. And that's when I was like, wow, I really want, like, if I do it, it seems like I'm good at it. I really want to focus on that.
Right.
So I remember riding on the subway home after the movie and just like thinking to myself, like, man, like I'm going to be a DP for sure. And after that, I just focused on that. I didn't do anything else. I didn't do directing. I didn't edit, I didn't write or anything like that.
Wow.
So yeah, I wanted to do that, and I wanted to go to LA after Howard, and I really wanted to go to the American Film Institute Conservatory.
Uh-huh.
So I was, I shot a whole bunch of student films, and I wanted to make a reel specifically to get into AFI, and I did that, and luckily I was able to get in, and then
Good.
it was off to the races from there.
Right. Right. So transitioning from, going from Howard and then moving on from there. Um, did you find it, was your journey, I can't say, I don't want to say difficult because I think we all have difficult journeys, but interesting, I guess. I guess your journey was interesting, right? It had its moments. Did you ever have any doubts? Was it a time, was there a fork in the road where you had to make a decision? And then do you remember what it was and how it was?
It's hard to lock down just one thing, because like the doubts came every day, man. It was every day, because like going into AFI, um, I was one of the youngest people, if not the youngest. I don't remember now. If so, I might have been like the second youngest or something like that. So I was one of the youngest people. Um, I was the only black man in the program, in the cinematography part of the program. And also there were tons of people that had way more experience than me, people who had shot feature films already and everything. And so, I went in kind of insecure. Um, and I told myself, I was like, you know what? Because these people have been on sets and stuff like that, and because they're so far ahead of me in regards to, knowing equipment and things like that, I was like, all right, I'm just gonna like stick my head in the books and try to be the best when it comes to just overall knowledge and theory. And yeah, and so I just, I just made it happen and tried to like carve a little niche for myself at AFI. And yeah, I guess it worked out. But yeah, every single day when I was there, um, yeah, there were a lot of doubts and everything. And then even after school, there were a couple of years after I graduated, I called it dark times. And I think it was from like 2008 to about 2010, where I'm just struggling to find work and not having any money, eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches every day, not wanting to go anywhere because I didn't want to spend money, on food stamps and uh, you know cleaning up MacArthur Park in LA. Yeah, so there was some struggle and a lot of doubt there, but I was able to make it work.
Yeah.
You
So
know,
so 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 I guess the phrase starving artist that lends itself to every aspect of the business, not just in front of the camera, but as well as behind the
yeah.
camera. Right.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I always tell people like, if you don't love this, it's not going to work out. You shouldn't even try,
Right.
because there's too many problems that you have to deal with aside from all the good stuff.
Hmm.
Um, so you have to be okay with solving the problems as well as being okay with all the good stuff too. And so
Right.
if you don't love it enough, you're not going to want the problems.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
So you touched on it a little bit, in AFI being one of the only Black people in the cinematography program. Um,
yeah.
we've throughout that journey, and even when you got out of school, did you still find it like that too, as well? And did it mean that you just had to prove yourself over and over again, or anything like that?
Oh yeah, yeah, all the time. Yeah, even after I left school, I kept finding myself being the other.
Hmm.
And it's crazy, like a lot of times it wasn't even necessarily the color of my skin. It was also like my age too. Like, man, I couldn't tell you how many times I would be up for a job and producer would be like, "Oh, but he's so young. Um, I don't know if he's experienced enough, things like that." And so I always had to deal with that, and I always had to like prove myself on set and work even harder. Um, you know, there are times when I did think that maybe they were focusing on the age as an excuse to not focus on other things,
Right.
you know.
Right.
But so age is a little bit more politically correct nowadays.
Yeah.
Ageism and stuff like that. But yeah, it was definitely something I had to overcome.
Mhm.
And I had to prove myself, and I felt like I needed to prove myself even more than some of my other peers as
Right.
well.
Right. I,
Um,
I can tell you, the first time we worked together, I can honestly say you were probably the youngest DP that I had worked with
Gotcha.
on a major show, like on a major, major budget show. I worked with on some shorts and stuff with people up and coming and trying to get their feet
Right.
wet, stuff like that.
Right.
You work with people like that all the time. But then having you come in, and it, to me, I'm gonna be honest, to me it was like a breath of fresh air, because
Right. Right.
and taking nothing away from any other DP that I've had the opportunity to work with, they were old gray haired white men, you know,
Right.
and when you came along, it was like, oh my goodness, like somebody that I can relate to, somebody that we kind of, we can speak the same language and kind of get it. So for me, it was like a breath of fresh air once we had the opportunity to work together. And but I definitely hear what you're saying about the age. People probably still don't probably still give you a headache about that, no matter what you've done.
Yeah.
They kind of try to throw that out as well,
Yeah.
because I don't even know, well, like, how old were you when we met? Like, were you even 30 yet?
Man, I was 30 or 31, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I think it was 30 or 31.
Which is crazy, because in some industries, like, that's old, you know.
Right, exactly. Yeah, yeah,
In some industries, being 30 is like you should have all your stuff together by you 30, but
exactly.
for some reason in this industry, 30 you kind of just, unless you kind of got a spoon fed, you kind of like stuck being 30 as the
Yeah,
young, you know.
and I think a lot of that comes from the everyone getting used to seeing, um, you know, old white men
Hmm.
behind the camera,
Yeah.
for lack of a better term.
Hmm.
And like everyone's been so used to that anytime there's an other, it's like, whoa, there must be a reason why I shouldn't hire this person, because I
Right.
normally don't see this. So
Right.
obviously there's a reason,
Yeah.
and not knowing that the reason is opportunity, you know. Um, so yeah, just open up opportunities, and you'll start seeing a whole lot of different people.
Right.
So yeah.
So explain to me this. So this is me not being in the that department, right? Which by the
Right.
way was, and when I came up in the business, was my first choice to be in the camera department, until I worked in the camera department for about a week, and I was like, no,
Right.
not gonna do it. You know?
Yeah, yeah. It sounds all great until you actually deal
Oh
with it.
yeah, I was all gung ho and everything, and then I had to you know uh, um, run film in 100-foot mags in the beach, and I was like, I'm done.
Right.
So I'll leave that to the other people. But anyway, explain for people who don't know what it is you do, right? Ex,
Yeah.
ex, Kind of explain in layman's term what that is, because I've heard people say I'm a cinematographer, right? I've heard people
Yeah.
say I'm a DP. I've heard
Right.
people use both of them interchangeably. So is there a difference between the two terms, right? Cinematographer versus DP. Can a cinematographer be a DP, and can a DP be a cinematographer? Like, what's the difference between just those two terms alone? Like, if somebody comes up and is like, "Hey, Mr. Vialet, I want to be a
Right.
cinematographer," and then somebody else comes up and says, "I want to be a DP," is it the
Right.
same
Right.
thing? You know?
It is. It is. And for anyone who doesn't know, probably in the simplest terms, what I do is, um, I work with the director and take their vision for a movie or TV show, and translate that vision photographically. So I'm in charge of camera and lighting, and those two departments, and you know shoot a movie with it. So yeah, and I think that's sort of where the term director of photography comes. Um, Most people, you know, will be of the opinion that the two terms are interchangeable, and there is no difference. Um, I guess maybe the easiest way to explain it is that director of photography is the more, it's the term that's used more professionally. I believe that's the label that we are in the union, is director of photography. Um, and cinematographer is used, and to me, it's preferred, but it's used more artistically and socially as well too. Is a cinematographer, and director of photography is the more professional term because that is the official label for the union. So, but there is no difference really, and DP is mostly just because cinematographer and director of photography are way too long for a lot of people to say. So we just shorten it and say DP.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
So, so being a cinematographer slash DP, and being in control of, so basically you're in control of how the film is going to look or how the TV show is going to look, right?
Right.
And so what we want to get people to understand, like the term director of photography, like a lot of people look at the hierarchy within the business and they say producer, director, and and you're also a director. So you're a director of photography. So how does that relationship work between you being a director of photography and then a director just being the director of the show or the movie?
Right.
How does that relationship work for the both of you?
And I think that's where that's one of the reasons why a lot of people would prefer the term cinematographer, because using the term director can get a little confusing sometimes, especially because there is already a director on set. So how can there be two directors, right?
Right.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and that's what I always want everyone to know is that the director is the boss when it comes to creative decisions and stuff like that. So you should always defer to the director and the script, obviously. Um, so the way I like to work is a complete collaborative experience where I really just try to be completely in sync with the director and what his or her vision is, and just translate that on screen. And that can look like totally different things when depending on who I'm working with. So some directors would prefer to just like focus on dealing with the actors and dealing with the performances and stuff like that, especially if it's like a performance heavy um, project, and would just leave everything up to me in regards to the imagery, and obviously with a little bit of input and decision making from the director. And then there are some directors that are like completely all visuals, and they're like, I want this type of lens and this and that and this and that and this and that. And I'm okay with working with either or, but I would say the most creatively fulfilling to me is someone in between.
Mm-hmm.
um finding that balance between having a vision and leaving an opening for collaboration as well too. So that would be my preferred way of working, but I try to adapt my style to whatever director that we're working with. So
Right.
I'm sure you probably do the same thing too, in your field. And I think those are the most successful uh, people, in regards to being a department head, or the people that can adapt to different working environments when it comes to a director or producer.
Right. So I'm going to get into the fact that you're also a department head. I'm glad you
Oh
brought
yeah.
that up. But I also want to get into how, like continue with the relationship between you and the director. So
Right.
when you're first called to do a show, right? And I say show interchangeably between TV shows and movies because I know you do both,
Right.
right? So, and first of all, is there a difference between movies and television, right? As far as you're concerned, um, number one, and then number two is when you get that call, the interview process between you, is it between you and a director, you and the producers, or is it just like a one-on-one, or is it like you sitting in a room and you have to audition for the
Right.
for the job? and they look at your previous stuff. Like, how is that? How does that happen? You know what I'm saying? I know they got to look at your previous stuff, but like you said before, you know, sometimes they just look at your age. Sometimes they look at your race too. And how does that what do you bring to the table when you come in for an interview? You know, because if you were an artist, you would have your book, and you would lay it out on the table and like, this is what I have. You know, so how does it work for you?
I'll answer that part of the question first. It really depends on the project, because I've had interviews that ran the gamut. I've had interviews where I would meet with the director, we would sit and have lunch and not even talk about the project. It would just be like, hey, just vibing and seeing if we're having a good time.
Right.
Yeah, and I was like, wait a minute, are we not going to talk about this at all? Like, and there were times when I tried to talk about the project, but they were like, don't worry about that. Let's talk about something else. Then there are times when it's like extremely formal, like they, sometimes they ask you questions like a test, you know what I mean? Like they're like, oh, well, in regards to this scene, when you read the script, what were your thoughts and how would you, shoot that and everything? So I try to be as prepared for either scenario. But for the most part, I have a website, and right now, because everything's so digital, it's that's where the portfolio is. So I have a reel and scenes and clips from different projects and things like that. And then per project, I try to direct them to different parts of my site that might pertain to what they're doing. And there are times when I've read the script and I've put together like a pitch book. That's a little hard because it takes me a long time to do those, because I'm like, I'm very much a perfectionist. So
right.
I'm very meticulous when it comes to making these things. So that's a bit hard to do on a short turnaround when it comes to like, getting the call for an interview and then interviewing. But I've done that before, where I've put together like a whole like PowerPoint presentation and things like that. But sometimes, you just read the script and I just come up with ideas and just vibe. So it can be very different depending on what you're doing. And there have been times when more than once, I've had directors who are interested in me come on set on a set that I'm working on, and like look at me there.
Yeah.
Which is a bit nerve-wracking, but that's if that's what they want to do.
Right.
Cool. If that can get me the job, cool.
Yeah.
And then the first part of your question, in regards to the difference between working on movies and TV, in regards to my job, is there are some big differences. So the biggest difference is, for most TV, is the fact that there are multiple directors coming in, like a different director each episode or each block of episodes. And so, it's having to, exactly sort of what we talked about earlier, where, sometimes you have to adapt to different working styles of directors. So that just has to happen on a more regular basis on a TV show, rather than a movie where it's like you're spending time with this one director who has a singular vision that's going through the whole project. But sometimes on these TV shows, everyone wants to tell the same story, but everyone has different styles, and you sort of have to take everything that they're saying and try to put it, in context of what the showrunner and the creator want for the project.
Right.
Sometimes I can get into some butting heads, and sometimes it gets into, some great decision making. So it all depends.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I always found it interesting working on TV shows and working with the DPs, and then how, like, if you're doing episodic, if you're doing a television show, you might have a run of 12 episodes, and you might be on a TV show that only has one DP. How that person kind of sets the tone for the look of the entire show. And I always found that interesting, because that's a lot of responsibility, especially when you have multiple directors coming in. and they may have a vision of how they want things to look, and it may be episode 6 out of 12, and then and then you being the creative part of you being involved wants to accommodate, but then at the same time you have to keep explain that, because a lot of people might not understand, like you have to keep that tone of the show, especially with multiple directors coming in, and how you might get a director that wants everything like bright or low lit, and you may have to tell them, nah, we can't do that, because that's not the tone of the show. So explain that.
That's that can get tricky. That's one of the hard parts of the job. I mean, I would think and hope that the showrunner and the producers, who are the bosses, that they would do a great job with not only picking the right people to come in to direct the project, but also communicating to them exactly what they should be doing creatively before I even get involved.
Right.
So I would hope, the ideal thing would be that there wouldn't be any butting heads,
right?
Because because the showrunner, myself, and the director would be completely in sync with what the show is supposed to be.
In a perfect world. In a perfect world.
Yes.
Right.
Now, it's not always perfect. So you really have to play politician when it comes to that. Like there are some times when a director's style is more like, wide lenses and handheld. And, there might be, based on what we wanted what we've set up for the look, like maybe handheld is only reserved for a certain character or a certain location, with wide lenses. And this, this scene that we're doing is like long lenses. And, sometimes I have to say that. But at the same time, and that's been a struggle that I've been trying to deal with for a while, is finding the right balance between, being a constant through the whole show and having to maintain that, but also deferring to the director, because the director was hired for a reason, right? They're also hired because, they're a good director and they're supposed to direct the entire episode. So technically they're my boss creatively. So it's just trying to find that. And sometimes it might have to be going to the creator and saying like, hey, we can't come to an agreement. Like we need a third party to just, to come in and referee it.
Like a mediator.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, it's tricky, especially because some directors, especially in like a season 1 of the show, if a director comes in and it's like episode 7, which has been built up to for the past 6 episodes, creatively and visually, there are certain things that they don't know that we did in, let's say, episode 4, that was planting visual seeds for episode 7.
Right.
And so that's one of the reasons I'm there. I'm there to say, hey, so in episode 4, we were doing this, and we want to call back to that visually in episode 7. And so, you kind of have to work within that.
Right.
Yeah, and, some directors don't like that, but hey, that's the job, right? You're doing episode 7.
Right. That is part of the job. So I'm not sure if a lot of people understand that, like when you do TV shows and you do like a run of them, that there are multiple directors, right? And so it's like we've been talking about how to deal with a director who comes in and wants to, a certain way, and you try to get that mediator type person to come in and kind of interject. What about first time directors? Who do you like? Is there a type of director that you enjoy working with? And I'm trying to be political about this without trying to throw out any names or any hints about who you don't and who you do like to work with, because I want to see you keep working.
Right.
First, like you get first time directors who come in and they get
Yeah.
these they get these wonderful opportunities to direct a TV show, and then they come in and they have all these ideas, and then
Yeah.
is that the time that you run into and it's like, hey, let's slow down a little bit, let me get somebody else involved, or have you been able to kind of talk them off the ledge or kind of reel them in, so to speak?
Yeah, for the most part, I've had directors have been pretty respectful of the project, especially first time directors, because they're like, hey, I want to make a good impression, so I don't want to rock the boat too much. Like, actually, a lot of times it's the other way around. Like, I end up being the guy that wants to like rebel and be like, oh, you should be more brave. Let's do this. Let's do that. Let's do that. And they're like, oh, I'm worried about my job. So actually, yeah, it's been the other way around. I haven't really worked with many directors who've come in and just wanted to change everything.
Right.
But it's funny. There's always this opinion and stigma about first-time directors, and for the most part, I don't see that. Like, there are some first-time directors who I'm like, man, they should be considered veterans because they're pretty awesome, like a lot better than a lot of the veterans out there. I'll actually call someone out on a show that I did, P Valley, the director of the first episode, and it wasn't technically my episode, but I ended up shooting some pickups and reshoots one day with the director, and it's Karina Evans, and she's young. This was her first time directing TV. She's a pretty well-respected music video director, but this was her first time doing narrative stuff, and she was stunning. Like, she was great to work with. Like, she knew exactly what she wanted. She was decisive, and it was a joy working with her for that one day. So that just goes to show you, like, there are people that many would consider to be like first-time directors, and we have to coddle them or we have to watch out for them because they don't know what they're doing.
Right.
Because producers come to me with that too. They're like, oh, this is a first-time director. You have to help them out a little bit.
Yeah.
Nobody had to help Karina out, man. She was fine. So no, she was great. And I just use that example to say, like, don't sell anyone short just because they're first time. There's a reason why they're there.
Right.
And the creator saw something in them, and that's what it is.
Yeah.
But and to go off of that, the main thing that I want from a director, and the stuff and this is the thing that makes me frustrated. The main thing that makes me frustrated with certain directors are the ones that aren't decisive, that aren't that don't have a vision and they don't have an intent. That's one of my biggest pet peeves, is when we're doing something that doesn't have an intent to it. We're just doing it just to do it. I always feel that that's messy and irresponsible creatively too. So I think that, as long as you have an intent, and sometimes it could work out, sometimes it could be great, sometimes it might not work out. It might be a bad decision, but I think having confidence in what you're doing, I think goes a long way. And worked with Tyler Perry. I'll call him out too. So seriously, he's probably, and this is the biggest thing that I learned from him, working on some of his projects, is that he's one of the most decisive people I've ever met in regards to the decisions that he's making. He'll come to you and he'll say, okay, this is what we're doing. I'm like, okay, and that's why he can move so fast and everything, because he's confident in his decisions and he goes for it. And I actually learned a lot with him from that, and I learned to be able to appreciate that in other directors too. So yeah, I'm not gonna call out anybody that's the opposite, but I'll give people praise.
Right. Yeah. So that's I love hearing you say that, especially about first time directors, because I've worked on a couple episodes too where we've had first time directors, and I've kind of fell into the same thing where you know, I might get somebody say, oh, they're first time director, so just watch out for them or this, that, and the third. And they come in,
Right.
and I think because they know they're first time directors, they really, really do their homework, and they really, really come in really prepared. I mean, maybe some of the lingo, maybe some of the things that they've used to doing someplace else, or have read about, they haven't had that privilege of dealing with it until they come work with us. But like I love working with people anyway, but first time directors, like I'm not scared to work with first time directors, because I feel like they're so much more prepared, because
Right.
they just want to make a good impression on folks, and especially the cinematographers, especially that, what I'm saying, like to me, when I'm working on the set, the two most important people, and I'm not disregarding anybody else on the set, but the director and you are, because you guys, the writers have written the show, right? They put words to paper. We've got actors who will translate those words on screen, and then you have a director and a DP who's responsible for how it's going to look and how it's going to flow. And when I get on set, those two people, outside of everybody else, mean the absolute world to me, because other than the editors, you guys, male and female, are the ones who are going to make sure that the actors do what they're supposed to do, say what they're supposed to say, and then it's for you, it looks the way it's supposed to look, right? And then you guys are kind of the last people to see it. Like, once it's set, once it's shot, you're like, that's your job. And so I don't think, I mean, to me, I don't think, especially on set, and maybe for those people who don't know, like, it's so, your job is so underrated as what you do and what people see. Like when you watch a movie, like, and you like the way that light is shining through the window, and people don't realize that may have been on the stage, or that may have been, that daytime shot may have been in the middle of the night at 12 at midnight, and you made it look like day. So going into that, explain, like, did you ever have an instance where, like, it was, I know you love a challenge, right? Because because we work together, so I know you love a challenge. But has it been a shot that you're like, man, this is going to be difficult, and I don't know how I'm going to pull it off, but you did it anyway? Like, can you, like, do you have moments like that?
Oh yeah, all the time. I always tell people that those are the moments that I live for, because especially doing like episodic TV, things can get a little monotonous if you let it, and I'm always like just looking for those moments that make me happy to do what I'm doing. And and also there's always doubt and stuff like that every single day. But then there are those moments that I'm like, wow, that actually worked out. Movie magic, And so there's so many of them. I'm trying to think. If I'm forgetting anything and I can think of something, I'll bring it up later.
Oh yeah, but totally come back to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, there's one thing that I remember being so happy about, and it was on a project that we did together.
Uh-oh. Okay.
Yeah. So it was on a Madea Halloween, and like everyone knows, like a lot of those movies are shot really, really fast, and it's it's really hectic and everything. And so like the challenge is really keeping up with the schedule, keeping up with the pace. And I remember there was a moment when we were doing a scene, and there was another scene when Madea is going up into the attic of Brian's house, to like, because she heard a sound and she's going up there to like investigate. And I had to, we had no time to do it. And I still remember this. And I think we ended up having, it was like 8 minutes until the director was going to come on set. And so I had to have my crew go up there, start pre-lighting something, because we hadn't even scouted it or anything, right? And then I went up there with 8 minutes to spare. And in my head, I was like, I have no idea how we're going to do this, because it's supposed to be a moody scene, but not too moody, because it is a comedy. And so first off, I have to find that balance. But then we planned it. The director planned it as like a oneer, like one shot following Medea around as she's exploring. So I'm like, okay, so there's not supposed to be any light on up there. It's supposed to be moody, but not too moody. It's supposed to be kind of scary, but not too scary. And I was like, I have no idea how I'm going to do this in 8 minutes. And, I had no choice. So I went around and I was saying, okay, that. And, these days, especially, with digital, a lot of DPs have come to depend on the monitor to like judge lighting and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And I try my best not to depend too much on that, especially when it comes to pre-lighting. And so the cool thing is that it would take 8 minutes for all of the equipment to come over, all of the camera equipment, monitors and stuff like that. And so I couldn't use any of that. So at the moment that the monitors were up, we were going to roll camera.
Mhm.
And so I was like, all right, I got my light meter, I got my eyes, and I'm like, all right, set this up, set this up, set this up. I'm reading the light, telling them, all right, set that light here, set this light here, set this level, set that white balance, that color temperature, and all that. And director came on set, and he's like, action. And the first time I'm seeing any rehearsal or anything like that is the shot that's in the movie.
Uh-huh.
So, and I'm watching it, and I was just blown away. I was like, whoa, I actually kind of know what I'm doing, right? Like, it's crazy how it actually looked exactly like what I imagined in my head.
Right.
And I lit it with math. You know what I mean? With my light meter and just, instincts. And it's one of my favorite parts of the movie, and that was really impressive. And I was feeling myself for like 5 minutes there for a little bit. But
Oh, in that world, that's a lifetime. 5 minutes is a lifetime.
right,
Yeah.
right, yeah. But that's one that I can think of that really I was really happy with in regards to like being able to solve a problem.
Right. Right.
Yeah, effectively.
And I remember that scene. I remember that day too, and I remember how it all came about. And that's just a credit to you being prepared and just studying your craft. And you just mentioned that you did it, using a light meter. You couldn't bring the monitors over like you normally would, and then using math and stuff like that. So, like your preparation for a show, for a movie, for the scenes. When does like how far in advance? Because I know you'll get the script and you'll read it, right? But how far in advance does your preparation go? And then where do you pull from, like your like some of your creativity, your creativeness? Where do you pull that from?
That's a good question. The In regards to like how soon do I start like preparing? It's immediately, like before I even get the job.
Yeah.
I just can't I can't help it. Like right now, I actually just had 2 interviews a couple of days ago for jobs, and I read the scripts for them, and immediately I already know like, oh, what lenses I'm interested in and stuff like that, and oh, I think this would be cool, this would be cool, this would be cool. So really, it's immediate, and hopefully, I would get the job,
Mhm.
and then I can just continue that from there. But immediately, as soon as possible.
Yeah.
I would love to be able to prep for 6 months if I could. But obviously can't do that.
Mhm.
But yeah, it happens immediately.
Mhm.
And in regards to what I pull from, um, it's everything, like from uh, paintings to photography to um, other movies, modern art, and even now, like it's like um, things like comic books and um, video games,
Mhm.
especially video games these days, man. Like
Yeah.
I don't know if you played a lot of like a lot of RPG video games
Yeah.
recently,
Yeah.
but they're like some epic movies, man.
Right. Right. They
And
are. They are. Like sometimes I can't.
yeah,
Yeah. I can't differentiate
and they're,
between.
and what were you saying?
I can't really tell. Like, is this like what am I looking at? Like,
Right.
am I looking at something real, or is this like so? Yeah, what they do now with the video games and the technology is amazing. So
Yeah, it's mind blowing. Yeah, and like so I'll I'll be and that's actually one of the reasons why I got into video games fairly recently is because I was like, whoa, this could actually be something to pull from creatively,
mhm.
because especially with video games, there's no, and animated movies are the same way too. There's really no limitations, so creatively they can just do whatever they want to do, you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and the sky's the limit, and so it's just interesting seeing that and being able to pull visually from that. So yeah, and it's and also it's part of the job, man. So it's like I'll take time. I know you asked recently about what to do during the during shutdown and quarantine and stuff, and I've been brushing up on a lot of art and photographers and
Mhm.
sort of creating little like reference things for myself, so I could pull up stuff like I recently saw a painter. I discovered a painter that all that he paints are um, women's figures in water. And I was like, that's so specific that it's like a
Yeah.
cool reference. Like maybe at some point I'll need to
Right.
reference that. And his stuff is really good. So yeah, so I would say like that's really important to me, is constantly keeping up with um, visual references,
Mhm.
you know? So
Yeah.
yeah.
So technology wise, has it made your job easier, tougher, or kind of in the middle? Because I know you came up and you like a lot of people have never worked on film
Right.
versus what versus the digital age. And I know you came up and like how to load a camera with film, right?
Right.
Some people haven't had that opportunity, not especially during the show. So with this technology age, has it made your job? Because a lot of people feel like you can shoot a whole show on your iPhone now. Um,
Yeah.
has that taken away from the creativity part for you, or has it made it easier, or where does it lie with you?
No, that's a great question, because it's uh, on on one hand it does make things easier, and then on the other hand it creates other problems as well. Um, so you just sort of have to deal with both sides. So on one hand, it definitely makes things easier in regards to all of the things you have to worry about, right?
Mhm.
So like with film, it was always like, man, I hope I'm like doing the math right. You know what I mean? Hope it all works out.
Right.
And you won't really know until a day, maybe 2 or 3 days after you do it. Um, so it helps with that, with the stress of that happening. Um, it helps a little bit with the fact that it's easy to communicate what you're doing with other people, because they can sort of see exactly the way it's going to look digitally.
Mhm.
But at the same time, with that presents other problems where, because everyone can sort of see what's happening exactly, that not only presents problems in regards to people wanting to change things
Mhm.
and change your work even after the fact, but it makes the access to the technology and the access to the immediate judgment of an image makes it so that there are a lot more people that think that they can do it.
Mhm.
Whether taking up a camera, taking up an iPhone and shooting a movie and stuff like that. Which on one hand is great, because that means that there are going to be people making content that normally wouldn't get the chance to make content, and
Mhm.
that's awesome. I don't want to take that away from anybody, and I think that should be here, because I think we just need as much content as we can get, right?
Right.
Because I think that'll help to make everybody better.
Mhm.
But at the same time, that also means that there's more to weed out in regards to quality,
Yeah.
whether that's the content itself or, you know, the people behind the camera or the people in front of the camera.
Mhm.
And so, you know, there are those challenges too. And yeah, and a lot of times I have to deal with that, especially on the post-production side, where everyone has an opinion because it's so easy to understand because you can see it. You know,
Mhm.
back in the film days, there wasn't much you can do, and film was, you know, because a lot of people didn't really know how it worked, so it was this magical thing, you know, and so cinematographers had a little bit more ownership of what they were doing. But now it's like, you know, a producer that I've never met can like see it and be like, oh, you know what? No, I think we should do this, and then they can completely change everything.
Right.
So just dealing with that is the is the biggest challenge on my end. So yeah, it's there's, you know, pros and cons to it.
Hmm. So uh, would you say that the way things are done now, digitally, and with the technology that's readily available, would you say now it's more post production driven, as far, you know, because they can, like you say, they can do so much stuff after the fact, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, there's a danger of that. And I try to push back on that so much because I think there's a danger in trying to do everything in post production, because then that means that it I think it nullifies and invalidates everything that all of these artists that are getting paid a whole lot of money are
Mhm.
doing on set.
Right.
Um, you know, and at a certain point, it's like if you want to depend on post production, then just have post production make the movie. You know, because it's like, why are you paying all this money to, you know, these wonderful artists on set doing
Mhm.
things when, you know, if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. And the thing
Right.
is, I'm not even saying that out of spite or anything like that, because there are, you know, obviously animated films, and you know, mostly CGI movies and stuff like that. They already do that. Some
Right.
people want the freedom to just do things on the computer, and that's fine, you know. But I think if you decide to do things live, I think you owe it to, you know, the actors and to the artists that you hire to, you know, be faithful to their work, you know, and
Hmm.
be respectful of their work. I think that it's unfair to, like, you know, like if you're gonna get like, you know, an actor giving an amazing performance, I think it's unfair to invalidate what they're doing by just throwing out, you know, all of the techniques that were used to capture it. So I think that there's a danger in saying, "Oh, we'll just fix it in post" and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because you know, I take pride in my work. I know that, you know, everyone else does, like the ADs, you know, costume designers, post production, production design, makeup. You know, everyone put their all into making this look a certain way, and to just change it, you know, in post
Yeah.
production because you can, you know, I don't think that's really fair or
Right.
respectful. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. And I have to agree with you on that. And you know, I'm an AD, so my job is more logistical than it is creative. But you know, when I'm in the midst of it, and we're putting it together, and like you said, you see all the hard work that goes in, and then you turn on the TV or you go to the movie theater, and you're like, wait a minute, that, like, what happened to all the stuff we did, like, you know, for that 15th hour, you know? So I
Right.
kind of agree with you. And but I like the accessibility of it as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm kind of in the middle, but I'm more like the old school way, you know, as well. Um, but on that note, visual effects, how does that
Yeah.
affect you? Like, you know, I can watch, like, I just watched Mulan recently, and like the visual effects and the CGI on that, how does that affect you as a DP? And do you enjoy working with visual effects and CGI and things like that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do. Um, I've never done anything that was like as heavy, as CGI heavy as something like Mulan.
Mhm.
But I've done some heavy VFX work, and it definitely affects my job a lot. Because I also, I hate to watch movies and there be bad special effects, or bad VFX.
Mhm.
And I've done some movies where I would watch the final thing and I'm like, whoa, that really took me out of the movie.
Yeah.
So because of that, I do get very um, picky and ornery a little bit on set when it comes to VFX,
Right.
and when it comes to selling it as much as possible.
Mhm.
So, um, a lot of people, they think that VFX sometimes is a band-aid for things, and they're like, oh, we'll just do everything in post. But that's the danger, right?
Right.
Because there are certain things that VFX and computers still can't really do um, in a believable way. For example, gunfire or explosions and things like that. I think that you know VFX hasn't really caught up to being able to realistically show the play of light and shadow when something like that happens.
Mhm.
So I try my hardest um, to use lighting and use interactive lighting as much as possible to be able to sell it. I think the best VFX is the stuff that combines the practical stuff with computer generated stuff. You watch something like Dunkirk, right? The
Yeah.
Chris Nolan movie, and Chris Nolan, he's famous for doing things practically or being able to combine practical effects and visual effects really, really well. And I was watching some like behind the scenes of that stuff, and I'm like, it blows my mind that some of that stuff was um, computer generated,
Mhm.
and it wasn't a lot of stuff, but the stuff
Right.
that was, I was like, whoa! And it's because it wasn't all computer generated. You
Mhm.
know, there's tactile things that you can feel in the frame that help to hide the fact that there's also computer generated stuff in the frame.
Right.
And I find that really cool.
Yeah.
And finding that balance, and um, and I think because I feel so strongly about that it really does affect my work. Because I could just be like, oh yeah, they'll just deal with it down the line in post.
So
Um,
I got a quick question about that, and I don't want
yeah, yeah.
I don't want you to lose your train of thought, and I don't want to lose with this question.
Oh yeah.
So because of that, because you're trying to combine it or use less of it, so to speak, does that make you work harder?
Oh yeah. Yeah. It totally does. And I think a lot of it is because, especially now, especially because everyone thinks that computers can do everything. Um, there's a there's a tendency to assume that I don't have to do a lot on set,
Mhm.
and so it makes me work even harder because I'm like, no, 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 no. There's a lot of explaining that has to happen
Mhm.
when it comes to, hey, I know that this is just this, but it's like we gotta, there are certain things that we gotta do, or we have to make sure that we take notes. My crew takes notes of camera positions and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So I try to be as supportive as possible to the VFX supervisor when they say, "Oh, we have to do this and this and this and this and this."
Mhm.
Um, yeah, because and sometimes even I'm tempted to be like, you know what, let's cut some corners, but I gotta make sure that we don't cut the corners.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I remember. It's funny, another Medea movie, and so every time we did the Medea movies, you know, there is a lot of, because Tyler Perry plays different characters in the same frame. There's a lot of like stitching and split screen and stuff like that that's happening, and a lot of people wouldn't know that, that takes a lot of work in terms of the steps that has to happen.
Mhm.
And there were so many times on that movie when I was like, "Man, I just really wish we could just move on from this,"
Uh-huh.
but you can't, because like the moment that you do that, something's gonna mess up and it's not gonna be sold well,
Right.
like there were times when I was like, oh man, do we have to, like, I'd really love to move on, do we have to sit down and like write all these notes, but
Yeah.
you really do,
Right.
so yeah, to answer your question, it does make you work even harder just because there's just more
Mhm.
considerations to think of, and there's other influences trying to stop you from doing that.
Right.
you know
Right.
so
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. So this, I think this is the second, maybe the third time you mentioned this, and this was, you taking notes and measurements. So being a deep, like I'm 18 years old, Richard, and I want to be a DP.
Got it. Yeah.
I'm 18 years old and I want to be a DP.
Yeah.
And I just bought a camera from one of the electronic stores.
Right.
And I have my iPhone and I got this light hanging up in the back right there. Right.
Right. Yeah.
Right there. So
Right.
I'm ready to shoot. I'm ready to shoot a
Right.
movie. I got the script already written. Well, it's halfway written. What advice would you give me at 18 years old, or yourself at 18? Well, you already had your life planned out for you. So that was a joke, but just 18-year old coming to you and
Yeah.
saying, I just watched the movie and I watched behind the scenes and now I want to be a DP.
Right. Right. Um, a lot, the advice I would give is, it has a lot to do with what we've been talking about before. So I think one of the biggest things is, familiarizing yourself with the language of cinema, and whether or not that's like watching a whole bunch of movies, reading a bunch of books on movie making, and so I think just familiarizing yourself with the language of making movies, I think is the most important thing. After that, that's I think developing your taste, um, and your references as well too. Because and references, I don't mean references as in you should copy anything, but I think that having a good grounding when it comes to what's happened in the past and what's been successful in the past,
Mm-hmm.
I think helps a long way in your development. And also, references are really good too for communication, because we're not making these things in a bubble. Um, sometimes I wish we were. Sometimes I wish I could just be like, you know what, I just want to make a movie and just with no actors and just by myself.
Right.
That might not be as interesting.
Right.
So
Right.
normally you're not making a movie in a bubble, so you have to communicate things to other people. And I think that having a visual communication with other people is, um, really important. And I think references are a good way to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I could say, if you were my DP, Deuce, I could say, hey, have you seen Casablanca? Right? Remember that scene in Casablanca where you have seen Casablanca.
Actually, that's my favorite movie.
That's my favorite movie.
Oh my God,
Yeah,
that's my favorite movie. Yeah.
yeah. That is definitely my favorite movie. But yeah, I can say, oh, you remember the scene? Like, I think that, the idea that I have for this scene in our movie is similar to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's such a good, easy way to communicate certain things. So I think that building your library of references and stuff like that can help. And another thing that we mentioned earlier was being decisive, having an intention. Um, and so, before even starting it, just making sure that every single scene, you totally understand what that scene is about. And you have a clear idea of how you want it to look and feel. And I think that's really, like, as a director, that goes a long way. And as a DP too, being able to have intent, being able to read a script and tell a director, hey, I think it should be this. I think that's one of the most important things. So I think, just taking those things, I think, will go a long way to being able to make a successful movie, in my opinion.
So another question. The first movie or show you ever DP,
Yeah.
that versus the last movie you just did. What did
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? What are your, like, what would you tell yourself? Like if you were working, like the last show you did, I think was P Valley. Was that right?
American Soul.
American Soul. So you're working on American Soul, and there's this hole in the universe, and you can look at yourself doing your first movie, and you can yell through there like, "Hey, little Richard, young Richard, don't do that. Do this instead." What would you tell yourself?
I'll tell myself two things.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, Richard, don't stress so much over
Mm-hmm.
things you can't control,
Mm-hmm.
because that way leads to destruction. And also, I would say, be brave. Because I remember like my first movie, I was so nervous. I didn't want to ruffle feathers. I didn't want to rock the boat, and I was letting what other people were saying, like about my age and experience and stuff like that, get to me, right? So I was like, oh well, I'm gonna defer a lot to the people who've been doing it a while. And like, I wish I could look back through that little portal that's opening up,
Yeah.
and shake him and be like, dude, be man up and be brave, man, and just do what you want, because I think I've noticed that the people that are confident in their speech and in their decision making are some of the most successful, and I noticed that things have gone my way a little bit more by being confident and being decisive. And so, yeah, I would definitely be like, dude, don't stress about stuff so much, and just be courageous.
That's awesome. That's actually probably the best advice I've ever heard anybody give themselves, or really anybody else for that matter. And I'm going to use that one. I'm going to tell you that right now.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
also, what a lot of people probably don't realize by you being a DP is that you are head of your department, which
Right.
means like there are people who answer to you. You know what I'm saying? Like you may answer to the director, you may answer to a couple of producers, but there's a whole team of people who answer to you, and it's not always just about put that light over there or I'm going to make it look like this. Like there's a whole process going on behind there that a lot of people don't understand.
There's a lot.
I could go into detail about it, but since you're here, you can do it.
Well, I mean, to say it probably in the most simple terms possible, they just get my snacks on set, really. It's as simple as that. Just get my water, get my juice, get my peanuts.
That's the life.
No, I'm just kidding.
That's the life.
No, I'm kidding. No, I love my crew, man. It's a process. It really is. And you know what I'm talking about. It's like a lot of people don't know because they see a cinematographer as two things, right? A lot of people see the artist or they see the technician. What they don't know is that a cinematographer is three things: an artist, technician, and a manager. And the managerial part, a lot of times, is like the most difficult part of the entire process, is just dealing with people. There's a lot of, especially on like the bigger stuff that I've done, there would be, upwards of 60 people that, that I have to sort of corral. And so that can, because, there's different personalities and considerations to think of. So it can get tricky. But the cool thing is, a lot of times you try to set up a hierarchy, because obviously I can't talk to 60 people while I'm on set.
Right.
So, my department is split up into 3 different departments, and I try to, we have a department head for each department that talk to me, and they delegate to people below them, and then they delegate to people below them, things like that. And that's really the only way that this can work.
Right.
but yeah, so I am in charge of the camera department, the electric department, and the grip department. And the grip department has the key grip, the electric department has the chief lighting technician or the gaffer, and the camera department has my first camera assistant. So yeah, and I try to, obviously I'm not just like just talking to those people,
Right.
because I don't want to be antisocial, but but those are the people that I, because I want a clear chain of command and a clear chain of decision making that I think would be the most effective, and that's really how I do it. And sometimes being a manager means you gotta massage some egos here and there, you
Right.
know.
Right.
Yeah, sometimes you gotta play daddy, sometimes you gotta play teacher. You know what I mean? So, but
Yeah.
you make it work. And
Yeah.
I think the important thing is choosing the right people.
Mhm.
Because if my key grip is not the right person, he could also I also wouldn't trust him to pick the right people to work under him or her as well too.
Right.
Um, so yeah, it's all about like just choosing the right people.
And with that, you mentioned like the camera department, the electric department, the grip department. With those three departments that pretty much answer to you, even though you have your department, your people who are in charge of those people, but you're in charge of that one person per department. You still have to know, like your knowledge base has to be a wide range because you have to know about cameras, you have to know about lenses, right, and you have to know about
Right,
you know
right,
the electrical side of it and the grip side of it. So and that's one thing that always amazes me about DPs because you have to be a great manager. You have to manage your people, and then you have to make the show look good, right?
right,
So there's a balance between there that is, and it's not only that too because you have to deal with costumes and you have to deal with makeup,
right,
right? All right, so
right.
explain that dynamic. You're not in charge of that department, but you have to make sure that that what they put on somebody's body, that's clothes wise, doesn't affect your lighting, right?
Yeah, yeah. There's so many considerations. I'm glad you brought that up too, because it's you know, it can be a hard job because not only do you have to deal with your your own departments, but you also have to make sure that everyone else is on the same page with what you're doing. Because, like I said, we don't make these in a bubble.
Right.
Which is the reason why a lot of us do this is for the collaboration of the whole thing.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, because I am in charge of photographing the images and the imagery that comes out on screen. That means like color is really important or lack thereof. That means that shadow and contrast is really important as well too. And all of that can be affected by the location that we're in, the set dressing that's there, the makeup on an actor's face, what they're wearing, what they're laying on, what they're sitting on. And so there's just a lot of decision making and collaboration that has to happen between all the different departments. And again, just like with the directors that we talked about with episodic TV, the hope is that just like how the director was, you trusted the director made a good decision choosing you as a DP,
Mhm.
you also have to trust that they made a good decision choosing the other department heads as well too,
Right.
and that the understanding of what we're doing visually has been communicated to everyone,
Hmm.
and that we're all on the same page even before I need to even start talking to people.
Yeah.
And if that's not the case, that means that the director might not have done as good of a job as they needed to do with communicating it to everyone else. um, but sometimes you know like a wardrobe designer, for example, might not know, like they might know what we need to be doing in regards to, the colors that we want and things like that. But they might not know how a particular shade of color will look on screen with the camera that we're using. So a lot of that comes with testing and, like shooting hair and makeup and wardrobe tests and things like that. And yeah, so I think that's probably the most effective way to communicate for everyone to get on the same page is with doing a test or again references. And so I try my best to talk to the all of the department heads that would be affected in that way. Try my best to talk to them and to for them to understand what I would want visually, and for me to understand what they need as well too, visually. So I may have certain wardrobe designers say, oh well, it would be better if maybe if we use less hard light because this hat would really cause a major shadow and they need to wear this hat. And I'll say, oh, okay, well, that's good to know. Is it possible for the hat to be slightly smaller, or would that ruin everything? And so it's a lot of like give and take and a lot of collaboration.
Right.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, the idea is that we all sort of come to an agreement and make it all work.
Yeah. So do you have the power to make major changes like that? Like if you're able to see somebody's costume in advance, or even maybe not so much in advance, and it's totally going to ruin what you had planned, and maybe I didn't have a chance to collaborate on something. Do you have that power to go say that's not going to work for me, get rid of it, type thing?
Right. I wouldn't say the power necessarily, because I don't want to say like I'm in charge and all that stuff, but I think because at the end of the day, everything that all these departments are doing are going to be going through the camera and onto the film or onto the hard drive or whatever. And I guess because I am the person that knows how that's going to turn out in regards to the way that I'm capturing things, I think that people do tend to defer to the cinematographer because they're like, oh, in my head, this color red looks perfect. But because of what Richard is doing in camera, it might not look the way that it does in my head. So they're like, okay, Richard, I'll trust you. If this red needs to be stronger because the colors are being desaturated by the camera, then we'll make it stronger,
Right.
So, I don't want to say that, I have the power to just be like, no, that we're not doing that.
Yeah.
But I do think that there might be an understanding that, that we all have to defer to the imaging capture.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And because I am the person that sort of knows what's happening in there, there is a tendency to defer to that. But at the end of the day, it really is the director. Like, there have been times I've worked with, like certain production designers that, we wouldn't agree on what we want to do. And sometimes, you just got to pull in the director. Just be like, hey, we're not, we're not on the same page with this. What do you think? Because the director, it really is the person that has that power.
Yeah. Okay.
And and sometimes they have to step in and say, oh, this is what we want, and this is what we're doing.
Right. I'm gonna ask a few more questions. One because you brought it up. Yeah. Casablanca, and by it being a black and white film. Have you shot black and white before? And is it something you enjoy or would enjoy to do? And how much of a difference is it doing a black and white film versus doing your regular Technicolor type film?
Yeah, I love black and white, man. I have shot black and white. I've shot black and white film too, and I want to do it more. But sometimes the script doesn't call for it, or a lot of times, for the most part, producers and studios aren't really into it,
right?
Because they think it's outdated and people wouldn't be into that. But there is a purity to black and white that I miss sometimes with color. And, because in black and white, your contrast and your texture is all about tones of gray. So it really is all about light and shadow completely. And that's where your imagery is going to come from. Whereas with color, there's so many other things that are into the mix.
Right.
That while it can be beautiful in its own right, it's a little bit more complex. Whereas there's this purity to black and white that I find really interesting, especially when it's done well and when it's done right. yeah, I find it really interesting, and I'm a big fan of like hard light too.
Yeah.
I know that that's not really in vogue right now, but I just love hard light because of how intentional it is. Because I'm
Mhm.
all about intent, and just creating the right shadow on a person's face, to maybe hide one eye but highlight another. There's something about that that's really interesting, and I think that black and white, there's a tendency to be more intentional when it's done right.
Mhm.
And that's what I miss. And sometimes, like, there are some movies that I've done or TV shows and scenes that I've done where you could tell that's what I was trying to go for, is
Uh,
just telling the story in tones rather than color, and in shadows and shafts of light here and there. Um, so yeah, I love black and white, man. I wish more people had the guts to just go for it.
right.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Also, since we're here and everybody can see it, like you have a vast library behind you, right?
Oh
Although,
yeah.
like when I first saw it, I was like, oh wow, has like, and I'm listening to you and reading some of the stuff behind you, and I find it amazing. So
Yeah.
so out of the stuff that you've done versus stuff that you've seen, like are you more of an action type person? Um, like what's your favorite type of movie to watch, number one, and then
Mm,
what would be your favorite type of movie if you haven't already done it to work on?
okay. Good question. Um, y- I think that my favorite type of movie to watch, and granted, I love all genres. I really don't have like if you look at like my favorite movies list, like it runs the gamut.
Mhm.
But I will say this, that in terms of the stuff that I probably would enjoy the most, because of um, how much of pure cinema that it is in regards to audience manipulation through tone and visuals and stuff, would be like the horror thriller genre.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and on another end, when it's done well, comedies are the same way too, where there's such a um, there's such a purity when it comes to creating emotion through the camera and through the cinematic language that I really enjoy. Like if I watch something that like really truly scares me,
Mhm.
that's really impressive.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think that's one of the things that like in regards to the stuff that I was just really enjoy and just really completely be impressed by, it would be like the horror thriller genre.
Mhm.
Um, and in regards to something I've never done before that I really want to do, so you may not know this, Deuce, but I'm a big Western fan.
I didn't know that.
Um, yeah, I love Westerns, and classic Westerns, more modern Westerns. I don't care. There's something about riding on a horse in the desert that living off the land, you know, good and evil. Um, yeah, there's something about that that I think is interesting. And so I've never done a Western before, so I'd love to do a Western.
We're gonna write a. I'm
Um,
gonna write a western, and we're gonna do a western. I got.
that would be cool, man.
Yep. Yep.
That'd be cool.
We're gonna do a western. Um, Richard, this has been wonderful. I can go on and on
We should
about
go on and on.
I mean because no, honestly, because there are questions because when I watch shows and I'm looking at shot selection, so
Right.
your shot selection, and what I mean by shot selection is wide shot, your two shot, your singles, your close ups, your dolly shots, and things like that. Like
Right.
all that means something, right?
Right.
And some people might not understand what's the difference between uh, a close up versus an extreme close up, or a dolly
Right.
shot versus a pan from left to right. So
Mm.
I know they're all trying to tell a certain thing, but is that something that you use a lot in your repertoire? Do you depend on the director to say, I want this to be this way for this purpose, or is it like a collaboration?
Yeah, and ideally it would be an equal collaboration, but it's definitely something that I use all the time, when communicating that stuff. And hopefully the director would be well versed in the cinematic language enough to be able to understand that. But yeah, because I think that's one of the most important things to know. And it goes back to what I mentioned about people that want to get into the business. What they should do is to develop their understanding of the cinematic language, because if you don't know the language, you won't be able to communicate. If you don't know the language, you won't be able to tell the story.
Right.
So yeah, so I think that's I think it's really important. And that's not to say that you have to follow rules. Because I think art is all about breaking rules and doing new things and stuff. But I think I think that in order to create a great rap song, you got to know the English language. You know what I mean? So you know what I mean? Like, you have to know the basics and the rules of the English language to create good poetry.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that it's the same thing in film. It's really important. So
that's cool. That's good. That's good to know. So as an 18-year-old,
yeah.
I would have to be brave, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Learn the language. Is there a favorite movie that you study on a regular basis? Like, I know you have a wide range, but is there a go-to film or television show that, because I have one that I go to a lot and I reference it a lot, but is there one that you go to, like, this is it's not the bar, but this is the foundation for me, and this is what sets me on my path, like a motivational, like a boxer has a motivational song. Do you have a motivational show or movie that you go to?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have that with, I'm trying to think if there's one specific one, but I have like a group of them that I always reference, and I try to, like, for example, I try to watch a Steven Spielberg movie before every project that I start, right? I know Steven Spielberg gets a lot of flack because he's so popular, and people think that he's a little bit too sappy and emotional and stuff, but I don't care what anybody says. This guy knows how to use a camera, and, like, probably better than most directors in history, in my opinion.
Wow.
Yeah, and so, like, I'll watch something like Munich, for example, which is a recent movie that he did. And I found myself going back to that a lot because of how he uses the camera, and he uses it in such economical, intentional ways, and in ways that blow my mind. Because I heard, like, a lot of times he just comes on set and he just he looks at the scene for 5 minutes and he's like, oh, let me do this, and it's like so genius. And so I watched that to try to hopefully, like, suck some of that genius in. But that's not the only thing I watch. I watch some of his other stuff as well too. But also, I mentioned Road to Perdition before, because it is the thing that really inspired me to become a cinematographer. And so I try to, I do watch that a lot, because I consider that like the pinnacle of modern cinematography, in my opinion. So hopefully some of that genius can rub off on me too if I watch it, before each project. Yeah, I would say like Spielberg movies and Road to Perdition, I think, are big ones. Kurosawa movies.
Oh yeah.
I go back to Seven Samurai a lot, Rashomon a lot. Even a movie like Yojimbo, I go back to a lot as well too. So, just in terms of telling the story with the camera, I try to, like I said before, just try to let the genius, assimilate into me a little bit. So. Right.
I love Road to Perdition, and probably for a different reason that you do, because it was one of the only movies, if not the only movie, Tom Hanks played a bad guy.
Yeah.
So I'd be hard pressed to find a movie where Tom Hanks plays a bad guy in it, and that was one of them. And I thought that was genius that he played one, but he was really a good guy playing a bad guy type thing. So, so being a DP, being a department head, being young, being black, right?
Right.
How do you get your name out there? How do you advance? How you know what I'm saying? Like in coming up and even now in this day and time, like what do you do to get your name out there in advance and say, hey guys, like this is I can do this. Like I can do this job, I can do that job. I know you just said you had 2 interviews. Like what do you do to stand out, knowing that you can do the job already when you go into an interview?
Oh, that's a hard question too, because there's no rules to a lot of that stuff. But I think probably the most important thing is to let your work speak for itself. Because there's only so much that you can do, and sometimes at a certain point, if you're putting yourself out there too much, that'll turn some people off too.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that doing the work and doing such a good job that it speaks for itself, I think is probably the most important thing, because that's what people are more interested in anyway. They
Mm-hmm.
don't care about what you have to say for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, it's really networking, trying to build relationships with the right people, so that the network can just build itself at a certain point. And having people supporting you and being your cheerleader as well too. I think that's really important. So a lot of that comes from just trying to just being a nice person. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that people want to work with you, so that people can say, oh, Deuce is such a great guy. Obviously you're going to want to work with him, and
Mm-hmm.
people like hearing that. People want to work with good people.
Right.
So I think just being a good person, being a person that people want to be around, and just building a network, I think goes a long way. Aside from the most important thing, which is doing good work.
Doing good work. Right.
Um, yeah, and I think if you have that balance, if you have that combination of things, I think that's it.
Yeah.
Um, and obviously, because you mentioned it too about being a person of color, which is definitely a factor. In this day and age, so obviously understanding the way that the world is, and that you will have to work 10 times harder to be able to put yourself out there.
Mm-hmm.
I think understanding that and planning accordingly could help a lot. And the thing is too is that we on one hand, there are um, a lot of problems out there in the world, and there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, obviously, in regards to representation in the industry and things like that. But we are in a better place than we were back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's also important to recognize that, because especially in TV, like we're really making some moves. You know what I mean? With
Yeah.
Lovecraft Country and Insecure, all the Shonda Rhimes stuff too. Like we're making some moves. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
showing people what we can do. Um, but at the same time, there's still a lot of work to be done. It's definitely not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that understanding that, I think, can go a long way in inspiring people to be bold and be brave, knowing that people are listening.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, and so I do think that's important too. Is I want people to be confident, in the fact that, if you are a person of color, if you are part of an underrepresented minority group, that you still have a voice, and people are listening now. So, um,
And
yeah.
and then
So
and
I think
then
that's
and then
important.
and then you being a department head,
Right.
and you have some power to hire, right? So to hire certain people in your department. So is that something that you actively look for, people of color to work in your department who normally wouldn't? Because we all
Yeah.
know that this industry, sometimes you can get on the show and you see no representation at all. So with that being said, do you kind of not go out I use the term loosely, go out of your way, but find people of color who can get on that can do the job, who haven't maybe had the opportunity or chances to do so before.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm always talking about. I was actually just talking to someone about that yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely something that I'm always pushing to my crew. To just make sure that we are going above and beyond to try to be as inclusive as possible.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to our crew and stuff, because that goes a long way in regards to what we were talking about just now, where we want to show people who want to break into the business that normally wouldn't think that they could. We want to show them that yeah, you definitely can.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't necessarily mean, because I still take pride in what I do and take pride in my work, so that doesn't necessarily mean that you can just slack off and you'll be on my crew if you're a person of color, no matter what.
Right. Because it hasn't stopped for you. Like, even though you still have
Yeah,
to work twice as hard. So it doesn't,
exactly.
and I know exactly where you're going. Like, it hasn't stopped for you having to work twice as hard. So just because I've reached out to you and I hired you doesn't mean that you don't have to work twice as hard either. Because
Exactly.
now it's
Exactly.
not,
That's a
yeah,
great way of putting it.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's like, because I'm working twice as hard, that means that you should be working twice. I expect you to work twice as hard too,
right,
because you're also representing me. But not only are you representing me, but you're representing yourself.
right, exactly.
So I do expect you to work twice as hard as well too. So, I am, pretty. I do have high standards when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
that. Um, but at the same time, um, I definitely try to go out of my way to search for people um, who is part of an underrepresented group,
Mm-hmm.
so we can get more of that representation on our crews.
Yeah. Have you reached back? I know have you reached back to? I know you say you're from the Virgin Islands. Is there a big network of industry people in the Virgin Islands, first of all? And would you reach out to people in the Virgin Islands, or maybe go back and like maybe help out, teach a class or something like that, or even back
I'd
to
love to.
Howard? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to go back to Howard too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I just haven't gotten the opportunity. So if anyone out there is watching, from Howard or the Virgin Islands, I'd like to do that. There are a few people who are in the Virgin Islands, trying to do their thing, and that they're, especially like you said, with the new technology and stuff like that. It's like there's so many more tools to be able to um, express yourself. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a DP down there right now, Dwight Winston, who is doing a lot of great work in regards to commercials and music videos and stuff like that. And I don't really know him very well, but you know, um, I do notice the work that he's doing.
Yeah, yeah,
So no, so yeah, so that's great, and I'm totally open to you know uh, to mentoring and stuff like that too. So I'd love to do more of that.
yeah,
Um, I'm doing that a little bit here in Atlanta, and yeah, it's enjoyable.
yeah.
Just be able to give back and foster new talent.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, and I mentioned Howard because I'm also from a HBCU. Um,
Yep.
that's not Howard. Um,
Oh well, then I don't want to hear it.
well,
I don't want to hear it.
you're gonna have to hear it because I've mentioned Howard at least 2 more times than I should have on this show.
Right,
So
right.
University of Maryland, Eastern Shore, home of the home.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that's me. That's my heritage right there. That's
Yep.
my lineage.
No, that's a
And
good school too, man.
so I know it is. I know it is. I know it is.
It's like you don't have to tell me. No, that's awesome.
But no, Richard, this has been great, man, and I'm glad we can finally get together, even though it's not, it's virtual.
Right.
And I hope I answered and asked enough questions that people could look forward to and be like, they'll probably hit you up, say, Mr. Vialet, I want to be a DP. I'm 18 years old and I'm brave,
Right.
and that's about it. Help me
Right.
out with the rest,
Right. Right.
But I do have to mention this though. Because a lot of people get in this industry and they don't think that there's a lot of math involved, but in your field, especially, there's a ton of math involved that people probably don't even realize. That's true though, right?
Yeah. I mean, not like super complicated, trigonometry and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a technical aspect that is important to understand, and especially even more specific than math, it's more of like a physics thing. Like I think you really have to understand the way light works, and also the way chemistry works and stuff like that. I think that goes a long way to being knowledgeable as a DP, is just knowing that stuff.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Richard, thank you so much for being a part of this.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
we kind of went over our 90 minutes, which is great. And I felt like we could probably go another hour, but I don't know if people,
Right.
How people might tune out after a while. So, but
right.
maybe we can do a part 2. That's what we can do. We can do a part 2 or something.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. I'm always down.
Cool. Well, Richard, thank you, man. Stay safe out there during this time, and hopefully we can get back together again soon. All right.
All right. You too, man. You too.
Thanks.
All right, man.